Alright, we're looking at lesson 17-4 on page 438 today, all about circumference. So we want to figure out, well, how can you find the circumference of a circle? Well, it's obviously important to know what circumference is, so make sure you get this down. Circumference is the distance around a circle. So basically it's like the perimeter of a circle. So here's our question. Anna's going to glue some lace around the top edge of a lampshade whose circular opening has a diameter of 5 inches, a radius of 2.5 inches. How much lace does she need? So we're going to use the formula to find circumference of this lampshade. So here's our circle up here. It's a little oblong from this angle. And the circumference would be the distance all the way around the circle. And then we're given some information here. We know that the diameter, which is a line segment that goes from one end, or one point on the circle's edge, to another, and it goes through the center. So if this was the center of the circle, it would go right through it. So it's going to be the longest line segment possible for a circle. So the diameter from one point to the other, going through the center, is 5 inches. The radius is half of that, so it's like I'm cutting that in half. One point on the circle to the center is the radius. So anytime you want to find, say you're given the radius, and you want to find the diameter, you're just going to multiply that radius by 2. It'll give you diameter. Anytime you're given the diameter, if you divide it by 2, you can get the radius. You can find the radius. So you need to know either the diameter or the radius so that you can find the circumference. Let's look at the next page. Alright, let's look at one way. They're going to give us two different ways and two different formulas here to find the circumference. So here's the formula. Circumference is equal to pi times the diameter. Alright, so C is the circumference of the circle, D is the diameter, and then the Greek letter right here, we read as pi, represents the ratio of the circumference to the diameter for every circle, so it's just part of this formula. And we round it to 3.14. If you wanted to write it as a fraction, you could write 22/7, but we usually use this decimal in this formula because it's easier. So it's going to look something like this. Okay, so if circumference equals pi times diameter, you plug in your decimal 3.14 for pi, and we know the diameter was 5. All we have to do is multiply these two together to find out the circumference, or the distance around the outside of the circle, is 15.7, and I think it was, yes, inches. So Anna's going to need at least 16 inches of lace. 15 wouldn't go all the way around it, so you need to go ahead and round up to 16 inches. But to be exact, 15.7. Let's look at the other way. Alright, so here's another formula that we can use to find circumference. We can say that circumference is also equal to 2 times pi times the radius. Now, in the first way it was circumference equals pi times diameter. Well, what is our diameter? Our diameter is equal to 2 times the radius. So that's why we can change and take diameter out and put, here's the 2, and here's the radius. And remember, when we're multiplying, this is 2 times pi times the radius. It doesn't matter what order it's in. That property of multiplication there, the commutative property, doesn't affect the answer in any way. So looking at that again, if you're given the radius, you can just plug it in to this formula. So that's exactly what it says here. Since the diameter of a circle is twice the radius, 2r can be used to replace the diameter in the previous formula. So in this case, we go ahead and say circumference equals 2 times our pi 3.14, and the radius that we were given, 2.5, to, again, here we go, the same circumference, 15.7 inches. We'd round up to get enough lace to cover the circumference of that shade. Alright, let's look back on 438 at this another example, and sometimes they're going to ask you to work backwards, like in this case. How can you find the diameter or the radius of a circle if you know the circumference? So remember, always write your formula so you can plug in your numbers to see what you're getting. In this case, they give you circumference is 14 inches. Well, you know your circumference formula here is circumference equals pi times diameter. So if my circumference is 14, I'd plug that in. I know what pi is, and I'm going to multiply that times d. So if I want to find the diameter, all I have to do is get rid of that 3.14, and we're multiplying by it. So next step would be to show that I'm going to divide by it, and then I also have to divide 14 by 3.14. I'm left with, right, this cancels out, I'm left with d on this side, and d equals 14 divided by 3.14 divided by pi would give you 4.46. So there you have the diameter. Now once you have the diameter, you should be able to find the radius, because the diameter is 2 times the radius. So what you can do is then say, well, if I want to find the radius, I'm going to take my diameter and I'm going to divide it by 2. So plug that in to divide it by 2 and you would get 2.23. And they show that example to the right. Let's look at that. Okay, so here they're going to show you how you can figure it out over here if you want to find the radius. Again, you have your formula for circumference with the radius. Circumference equals 2 times pi times the radius. They plug in 14 for the circumference. We know it's 2 times pi times the radius. So they go ahead and multiply 2 times pi to get 6.28, still times the radius, equals 14. Well, I want to get r by itself, so I have to get rid of this 6.28, and to do that, opposite operation, I go ahead and divide by 6.28, which cancels out. Have to do that to the other side also. 14 divided by 6.28 would give you what we said earlier, 2.23 inches would be the radius. If you need to see that again, just rewind it and watch this again. Okay, for homework, go ahead and look at page 439 and the guided practice. I'd like you to go ahead and it says use the diameter of the radius. 1 gives you the diameter, 2 gives you the radius. Shown for each to find its circumference. Use 3.14 for pi or 22/7. You'll probably want to use the decimal. And then answer the questions. Do you understand on numbers 3 and 4? And if you have any questions, bring them to class tomorrow. See you then.